Hello, and thank you for joining me today on Cooking with Tristan, as per request. Basic knife skills. Now, the knife I will be demonstrating on today is a Western-style chef's knife, as are all the others I'm about to show you. They range from about 8 to 12 inches, and the blade curves to a sharp point. If you don't have a chef's knife already, I really recommend getting one. As you get more comfortable with using them, you can do just about anything, and pretty quickly. They really are the primary workhorse in a prep kitchen situation. And what brand, you might well ask? Well, what's more important is that the knife is sharp. A sharp knife is safer than a dull knife. So shop around, find something that feels comfortable in your hand, and keep it sharp always. Now let's talk about the proper way to hold that knife. When I hold the knife, digits 2 through 5 firmly grip the handle, and my thumb pinches the top of the blade just where the handle meets the metal. Notice how the bend of my index finger rests against the other side of the blade. Between the pinching from your thumb there and the support of your index finger, you create a lot of stability. Stability allows your blade to stay exactly where you want it and keeps things safe. Stability also allows for higher precision with your cuts. Now let's talk about how we want to keep that other hand when we're cutting. I keep digits 2 through 5 lined up tight like soldiers. This allows the side of the blade to flush up against the fronts of my fingers there, while I keep my fingertips bent slightly towards my palm. Again, this is a situation of both safety and also precision. Using the fronts of my finger against the blade helps me keep the knife exactly where I want it, and slightly bent back fingertips let me know that no matter how fast I'm going, my fingers are out of the way of the path of the blade. Depending on what you're cutting, you won't always be able to keep your fingers that flat, but the technique will remain mostly the same. Fronts of the fingers help guide the blade, and fingertips help stabilize what you're cutting while staying out of the way of the blade. As you travel with your knife, digits 2 through 5 act as little dancers, staying in formation as you move back and forth across the cutting board. Your thumb helps stabilize what you're cutting, and it can also help feed food towards the blade, but make sure when you do this that it never goes beyond the point of your fingertips. Let's get right into it with something common like a carrot. My dominant hand has the knife nice and stabilized. I remind myself of how I want my other hand in relation to the blade. Now I go to work, slicing down and forward slightly. The fingers on my other hand are either guiding the blade or stabilizing the carrot. If you want thicker slices, you just move along whatever you're cutting in bigger increments. Let's grab another carrot and do some juliennes. This time, instead of slicing perpendicular to the carrot, I'm actually going to make planks at an angle, or cutting on a bias. Once you have your carrot planks, all you have to do is line them up, stack them, and then slice them. And there you have a basic julienne. If you have to do a lot of julienne and you're not worried about making absolutely perfect cuts, you can actually shingle some of these planks and travel with your knife and get a lot more done at once. Use the same technique to julienne ginger and toss it in a stir fry. Let's take a look at dicing and slicing a humble onion. First, I just want to take that very root end off, and I'll usually take the very tip of the onion off as well. Then I slice the onion in half through the axis. Then I go ahead and peel that onion and clean up my cutting board, making sure there's no papery onion skin sticking anywhere. For this first half of an onion, I want to slice it. But before we do that, I'm just going to make a little wedge cut into that root end, just so we can get that out of there. It's perfectly edible, but if we didn't do that, the slices from that part of the onion would stick together Now going with the grain of the onion along the axis, I use my hand to align the knife and I go to work. Usually when slicing an onion like this, you get to a point where a part of it wants to tip over. So I usually just take a pause and let it do just that before I continue. Safety first. Now let's talk about dicing. I'm making slices all the way through the onion to the cutting board, but these cuts do not go beyond the other end of the onion. That way the onion stays together. When we were slicing, we got rid of the root so that the slices would be separate, and now we keep the root to keep the slices together. This gives us stability when we turn our knife sideways and make a horizontal cut towards the root end of that onion. And what this does is just makes us have a nicer dice. And I just take that root end and save it for some stock. Now in this example I did thin cuts, so I ended up with a very small dice, but you could easily just make 2 or 3 cuts and end up with a more medium or large dice. Again, your guiding hand decides the increments. This technique for dicing is the same, even if you're doing a small allium, like a shallot for instance. Let's take a look at garlic just for fun. To get that peel off, I just want to take the bottommost part of that root end off. And I use the side of my blade and just give that garlic a good whack. Grab that and shake it, and it should just pop right out. Again, take the bottommost part of that root end off, give it a little smack, and give it a little tap, and it should pop out eventually. Now for a real basic way to chop this garlic. Mine had a little bit of a funky spot, so I just trimmed that off. Now, like when I was peeling it, I just smash it with the side of my knife, pulverizes it, and now I just go at it with my knife. Fingertips are tucked back and out of harm's way. You can also make your guiding hand flat and keep it above the knife and try rocking the blade. Garlic is sticky, so make sure you wipe down the side of your blade on occasion. Again, just for fun, let's take a look at broccoli. This time I'm using the second most important knife in the kitchen, a paring knife. This small blade can get into that broccoli very easily, and I make nice florets. Inevitably with broccoli you end up with uneven florets sometimes. Instead of trying to even those up by cutting through the top of the floret, make a cut in the stem and then pull them apart, and you'll get prettier looking pieces. And don't you dare throw away that broccoli stem. It's delicious and we just need to do a little bit of work. We slice off the very end of that stem. Now using our paring knife, we just get into the base of that stem on the outermost edge, and then we peel away. This takes away the tough outer stem and leaves us the tender, delicious inner stem. And now you just slice that up any old way and cook it alongside your florets. Now let's say you're making a soup and you want potato chunks that are more or less the same size so they cook evenly. This can be tricky when you're cutting up something that is irregularly shaped. One thing you can do to give yourself better cuts is to act like a carpenter and square off whatever you're cutting. Slicing off the outermost edges of this potato will make it much easier to get even planks out of this potato, and even planks equal more evenly shaped cubes. Now, ignoring the brown spot, we can still appreciate the fact that we have planks of a relatively equal thickness. Now we line those planks up, and if you want really equal cubes, well then you can square it up even more. Then it's just a matter of finding your lines and then cutting against those lines. I think these would do rather nicely in the soup. Depending on what you're making, you might not need to fuss over it too much. This one I barely trimmed anything off, and I was still able to get pretty nice chunks out of it that are fairly equally sized. With something like breakfast potatoes, a little irregularity is not going to bother me, but I'm still going to use the same technique for the sake of efficiency. Fry 'em up. Thank you for joining me. Remember to keep those knives sharp and keep your fingers curled up behind that blade. Until next time.